Welcome to the Hand Fan Guide. After my recent victory in the Ninja God Invitational Z with just Flurry Fury, and the fact that 99% of the human population doesn't even care about this weapon at the moment, I figured it would be about time I make a guide all about the fans. Ever since its release in Season 17,
shout out to the dinosaur,
I've been hard dedicated to the weapon and it's instantly become one of my favorites in the entire game. So without any more delay, let's get started and get into the basics of the Hand Fans. Starting off with our basic overview, we have the two fans. Flurry Fury has Gum Net and Iron Fist Dive, while Tempest Lord has Gum Kunai and Tenchu Muyo. Moving on to the stats, it has 330 health and 90 speed, giving it the same stats as the Buster Hammers, making this weapon on the slower side, but having good survivability thanks to increased health. Ability-wise, the first and most important ability is Parry Time. Successfully parrying an attack will shorten your special cooldown as well as grant you a bit of bonus ninjutsu gauge. Second ability changes depending on your special of choice. Using Tornado Shot will make it Wind's Blessing. Wind's Blessing will shorten your Gumshoot cooldown when successfully landing a hit with either one of your tornadoes. It's not that great, but it exists I suppose. Wind Collar will give you Furai instead. This ability gives you back any lost orbs you have upon busting a drone or defeating a player. With the basic overview done, let's get into the moveset. Starting off, we have the neutral attack. Oh yeah, that's right. Your neutral attack is actually your parry. This allows you to deflect most physical attacks in the game. Unlike Cannon and V-Stance counter, getting a successful parry will stagger your opponent, causing them to be open for a counter attack. But you might be wondering, just how much can the fan parry? Well, instead of just me telling you everything, I'll just show it off instead. As for the actual neutral attack, it isn't anything that special. A 3-hit combo that does good damage akin to the Pez dispensers. Keep in mind, you have to get past your parry in order to go into your neutral attacks, unless you use it after a boosted attack from Tornado Shot. Although you can use this to your advantage by using the parry as a sort of feint into potentially mixing up your opponent. Next up is the back attack. Despite how the move may look, it is actually considered a melee attack. This is a great spacing tool against weapons that try to approach when their range is not as good as yours. Even if they try to back attack you with a teleport, for example, since this is also a back attack, it will usually start a parry. It can also be cancelled early by jumping or dashing. potentially allowing for a free break opportunity if they happen to fall for it. Next up is the wide attack, and this move just kinda sucks. Hey, Dino with the Time Machine here. I'd like to make a somewhat formal apology to wide attack, as it's not that bad of a move. It's actually pretty decent with Wind Caller as a sort of escape or potential approach option, but yeah, this move is still not that great. You can travel a decent little distance with it, it's decent at getting drones, and yeah, that's really about it. Low damage, launches on hit, it's just not that great. Y2, however, is a much better attack. It has this interesting little property where if you allow it, it'll move you up in the air a little bit. I'ma keep it real with you, Chief. This has no real practical usage. Trust me, I tried. The real use of this move is to be a finisher, as it'll launch the enemy away instantly upon successful knockout or epon, which is very uncommon for a melee attack. Lastly, for your normal attacks is the break attack, which is nothing really special. It has decent reach and a decent lasting hitbox, but it is a little slow to start up, so especially in lag, you have to be a little careful with it. Now we're on to the specials. The special moves really can define a weapon in their playstyle, and that is most certainly true for the fans. Starting off with Tornado Shot, my personal favorite of the two special moves. It starts off between two different forms of the Tornado Shot depending on your input. Holding up or no direction will shoot a small tornado. This small tornado travels pretty slowly but does have decent tracking, decent damage, and normal hit stun. It is notable for being able to block a decent amount of projectiles while it travels, even fully charged cannon shots. Holding left, right, or down will summon a big tornado in front of you. It does not move, but it does deal more damage. However, it also has way less hit stun. Like the small tornado, the big one can also guard against most projectiles and is a very good defensive tool. Of course, one of the main usages of the tornadoes is being able to dash into them. Dashing into either one of them will essentially give you a free gun boost. This allows an otherwise slow weapon to have some impressive movement. But now we have to talk about the most important part about Tornado Shot, and that is the boosted attacks. Boosted neutral attack, in my opinion, is the worst of the bunch, but it is still a very good move. Boosted neutral attack will jet you forward, dealing good damage and normal hit stun to anyone that you hit. It can even sharply turn to their position as well if they're not directly in front of you, for example. It doesn't have any sort of armor or projectile immunity, so it really is just a simple and quick dash forward. Boosted back attack is where things start to get a little bit more crazy. It has a much bigger hitbox and deals much more damage. It can even get rid of certain projectiles as well when it's active. This is by far the best move to use for third parties, as it's a relatively safe move to throw out. Boosted wide attack. Where to even begin? This is by far my favorite attack in the entire game. Not only does it have way more range, it also deals much more damage, causes spin stun on hits, and can even ignore most projectiles, including punishing blade beams. This is the ultimate punish tool for projectiles and attacks that have less range. Lastly, for the boosted attacks is the boosted break attack. You travel a way farther distance on top of dealing extra damage compared to the normal break attack. This move is so good that you can even combo after landing the hit, even if you don't get the initial break that you may have originally wanted. The distance this move travels alone makes it such a scary attack to go up against. Now it's time for Wind Caller. Upon activating the special, you will summon 2 wind orbs that will circle around you indefinitely. These orbs will remain around you until you either use them, take damage from melee attacks, or if you get knocked out. These orbs ain't just for show. If an enemy tries to attack you with a projectile, one of the orbs will guard it for you without you having to actually do anything. Each orb has a bit of mercy time behind them, meaning each orb can actually guard against multiple projectiles in rapid succession. For example, one orb will guard you against an entire set of kunais. Whenever you attack an enemy while Wind Caller is active, one of the orbs will come out and chase after the enemy. These orbs will usually always combo after your initial attack. This easily sets up for pretty easy bind combos regardless of which fan you use, thanks to the mix of melee and projectile hits, making it hard to even S-burst in the first place. Lastly, for Wind Collar is the Fire All option. Depending on the amount of orbs you have, it'll strengthen or weaken this attack. Using the Fire All move, you'll shoot out your orbs in a long projectile that travels pretty fast. Keep in mind this has no tracking, so the opponent has to be near stationary in order for it to land. If you only have one orb, it'll deal less damage and normal hit stun. If you have two orbs, it'll deal more damage as well as cause spin stun instead. This move, while it is pretty hard to land, is a great way to start a combo and can even be used to finish one off too. Now that the base moveset has been gone over, let's start to take a look at some other things to optimize your fan gameplay, starting with some Shinobi cards to run. When it comes to Shinobi cards and which one to use on the fans, you can generally run whichever one you desire depending on your preferences. So take my advice as a suggestion, not a requirement. One card I do believe is very strong for the fans is Drone Hustle. With the fans being pretty good droners, Drone Hustle just so happens to be a good option for them. While you may not have any sort of direct benefit for having less health, unlike Soundhammer's up-tempo ability that grants a speed boost at low health, or Pez Dispenser's full throttle field that'll actually give free points for being healed, Fan instead benefits from being the Fan. This is easily the best offensive weapon in the entire game. Anyone that tries to contest your drone will usually be dealt with pretty easily. Turnabout Guard is also a good option too. While it's good for basically any weapon really, it is a very good option for the fans as well, since it gives you extra bulk in the event that things go a little wrong. Ninja Sense Pro is also a pretty fantastic option that I discovered recently, as much as this card may not be super well liked. Always being aware of when enemies are nearby is such a strong option for the fans. This means that if you notice someone approaching you, even from behind, you'll be able to deal with them head on depending on their weapon of choice. This card is pretty cheap too, which allows you to invest into more expensive cards in your kit. Uchisemi Master is also a pretty decent option. It can add an extra defense to your already amazing defense game, as well as allow binds to be a little bit easier. Although using Utsu can get in the way of potential parry opportunities, so use it with caution. Another card that might not be so popular but is also a pretty good choice is Strike Big. Strike Big essentially gives the fans a much easier droning game during the early game. My last suggestion for a Shinobi card for the fan is Discerning Eye. This allows you to see drones and enemies through walls, which can give you potential opportunities to find drones you may be missing or set up for some third-party opportunities. Before we get to the final part of the guide, I have a couple of other things to add about Fan that I either forgot to mention beforehand or was just too lazy to actually edit it in. Boosted neutral attack from Tornado Shot actually has the same property as Y2, where it'll immediately hit away the opponent upon getting a knockout or E-Pawn. Generally, this is a lot more niche since it's hard to specifically set up neutral attack to kill, but otherwise it's a good thing to know. Both the normal and boosted wide attacks actually travel further if you use them on a slope, regardless if you go up the slope or down the slope. Wind Collar's Fire All shot is similar to the Cannon's Thunder Cannon, where despite the fact that you can't really get rid of the projectile itself cannot get rid of other projectiles. The orbs from Wind Collar, when they are sent out, actually have the exact same property as the Fire All, where they are unaffected by other projectiles, but they cannot be removed themselves. One last thing I want to bring up is a bit of a misconception when it comes to Boosted Wide Attack. Boosted Wide Attack is not invulnerable to all attacks, it's only invulnerable to projectiles specifically. Meaning if you have a move that has long enough range, say Yo-Yo Leap for example, then it will beat it out. For the final part of the guide, it's time to go over the matchups for the fan. How good does the fan match up against every weapon in Ninjala? Well, using this little tier list here, I'll demonstrate what is good and what is not as good. Up first is the katanas, and they're incredibly easy to deal with as a fan. They're an extremely basic weapon that has very predictable attacks. Like yes, I love seeing Razor Edge break for the billionth time. Their attacks are pretty easy to deal with across the board, and if anything I would say Charging Slash is actually a little bit more problematic, as one of the fan's biggest weaknesses is Super Armor, which you'll be seeing pretty soon later on. Otherwise the katanas are extremely light work. Up next is the drills, and these are somehow even easier to deal with. They don't have any sort of projectiles in their kit aside from their gumshoots, so that means that every single attack they throw out can be an easy parry. There really isn't much more to say. The sabers are the last ones of the katana class, and they're also pretty easy to deal with. Their attacks are slow, and that means it makes it an easy parry. Although again, like the other two, the base special, Froggy Block, is a lot better, since it cannot be parried or iframed since it's a spawnable wall. Whatever it wants to be really, making the entire katana class pretty easy to deal with. Moving on to the hammers, we first start with the Buster Hammers. And yeah, what is a Buster Hammer gonna do against a fan? Their attacks are slow, they don't have much range, and while neither of their specials can be parried, for example, it's not like you're gonna even reach the fan in order to do anything. Fans just easily wall out the Buster Hammers by a long shot. Sound Hammers are up next, and these weapons could be a little bit more on the problematic side, although they're not too hard to deal with. One of the funniest parts about them is that both specials can be parried, which is frankly pretty ridiculous. Then again, these weapons do have a mixture of melee attacks and projectile attacks that can be a little bit hard to deal with sometimes, although these weapons are not very hard to deal with since again, they lack good range and are pretty slow. Lastly for the hammer class is the Pez dispensers, and these are also, once again, pretty easy to deal with. Their attacks are kinda slow, and while they are strong, it's not like you'll be landing them super easily. Dragon God Motor might seem scary, but remember it can be parried, which means that one parry of a Dragon God Motor can just ruin everything about a Pez dispenser's life. Now on to the Yo-Yo class, and the Yo-Yo class is easily the best weapon to go up against the fans, in general speaking. Starting off with the normal Yo-Yos, these are probably the easiest of the three, but they are by no means an easy matchup. While all their attacks can be parried similarly to the drills, their attacks have long range and generally come out pretty fast, which makes them kinda hard to parry in the first place. Plus, if you're far away enough, even if they parry the attack, they won't always be able to punish you, which makes the normal yo-yos a pretty decent option. Now on to the Morph Yo-Yos, and these are easily the best weapons in the game to counter the fan by a pretty long shot. They have an awkward mix of melee and projectile hits that make it pretty difficult to know which move to use at which time. Beyond the Gum is unguardable, and even though you can avoid it, it's not a projectile, which means you can't just let it hit you with Wind Caller, for example. Golden March, as parryable as it looks, is also impossible to parry, which means that you have to respect this attack as well. These weapons are incredibly annoying to the fans, so if you wanna ruin a fan's life, use the Morph Yo-Yos. But please don't actually do it against me, please. For the final weapon of the Yo-Yo class, we have the Wheelies, which sits in the middle between how good of a weapon it is up against fan. While they also have a bit of an awkward mix of melee and projectile attacks similarly to the Morph Yo-Yos, they are a little bit more straightforward. Bumpy Accelerator is also a very notably annoying move to deal with. Even if you parry Bumpy Accelerator, it'll still keep going since that's just kinda how Bumpy Accelerator works, making these weapons a little bit annoying to deal with, but not impossible. Now onto the boards, and we're back to lightweight territory. The skateboards are just the skateboards. While Sonic Trick can be a little bit more annoying, it could be easily dealt with boosted wide from Tornado Shot or just having Wind Caller active. Skateboards aren't gonna really do much. And now for the surfboards, which are also very easy to deal with. While their specials can be a little bit more annoying, they are by no means impossible to deal with. Overpowering Wave can be beat out by just any long-range attack in the fan's kit, and Surfing Cannon is also very easily dealt with by just not caring about it. Moving on to the claws, these weapons, while pretty much every attack can be parried, they're also very fast and can be kinda hard to catch up with, making them at least a little bit more annoying to deal with, but they're still pretty easy to deal with. Now on to the cannons, and while the cannons might seem like a good option against the fans, having a much better movement speed and a bunch of projectiles against a slower weapon like the fan, you have to realize just how much the fans are good at dealing with projectiles. If your entire moveset is 90% projectiles, you're likely not going to do anything to the fans. This is easily one of the hardest matchups in the game for the cannon by a long shot. Last but certainly not least is the EI blades. And these are probably the only weapons in the game that I'd say is actually pretty even compared to the fan. Both have their own mixture of attacks that can easily deal with each other's options. Both weapons have counters, and both weapons have long disjoints as well, making this a pretty fun matchup sometimes, even if it's 99% of the time V-stance. Before wrapping things up, I wanted to wait until Season 19 had dropped to see if there was any potential changes for fan. And there was a whole 2 of them. Might as well talk about them at least. The window for landing a parry is now a little larger, which means it's now a little bit easier to actually get off successfully. This is one of those kind of buffs I never would have imagined the weapon would get, but all things considered, it is nice to have. The second change was a bug fix apparently, but the beams from Punishing Blade can no longer be guarded against by using Wind Collar, which is definitely a pretty sizable nerf. And that about does it for the hand fan guide. I hope this guide serves you well in your future endeavors of using the hand fans. Whether you intend on making this your new main, have it as a secondary, or just using it for fun, I hope this guide will serve you well. This video definitely took quite a bit of time to make, but all in all, I'm happy to have made it, and it was fun along the way. I'm definitely not opposed to doing more stuff like this in the future. But for now, thank you for watching. However, if I had to give one last piece of advice, make sure to actually use your parry. I cannot understate how extremely powerful a parry is in such a match-heavy game, so don't forget to use it. Although don't use it too much or you might end up doing this. Yeah, don't do that.